The all-new Inside Sources. Your inside access to the people and policies shaping Utah's future. Here are Greg Skordas and Holly Richardson on KSL NewsRadio.
A new report published by the Institute for Family Studies shows that, surprisingly, marriage rates are up slightly, divorce rates are going down, and meanwhile, Holly, more children are growing up in two-parent homes. I think those are 3 out of 3 good numbers.
Good numbers that have been, like, it feels like the trend ever since I have been paying attention, which is at least since I started college more than 40 years ago, that the numbers were pretty dire. So to have even a slight turnaround is really interesting. But we actually have Lois Collins with us. She's the longtime Deseret News reporter, and she wrote an article about this turnaround. Even slight turnaround. And I wonder if you could talk to us, Lois, about really what stood out to you the most about this new study.
I think the interesting thing is that for years we've heard that kids are in unstable homes,
right,
increasingly. And I think that really stands out, that even though marriage is only up slightly, and some of these numbers could be a post-COVID blip from people who put off getting married, the numbers still indicate that people who want to have kids are choosing to do it within a marriage. So there's a drop in single-parent households. There is an increase in biological families that are intact. Those are all significant for kids in a lot of ways, because they have, not that there's anything wrong with being a single parent at all, but what being in a two-parent household gives you is more resources, more FaceTime with parents, less time traveling between parents, less dissension perhaps between parents. So there are a lot of benefits to that. So that stood out to me. It's good news for kids in those families. A couple of other things stood out. One of the things that this study saw was that it's predicted now that 1/3 of adults, of young adults who are not married, will never marry. Even if they want to marry, for whatever reason, they will not marry. 1/4 of young adults in childbearing years are never going to bear children, which is interesting, and has a whole bunch of ramifications.
Number.
Yeah,
those
are really
big numbers.
Number. You think, oh, well, that means 3/4 will, but then you think about how many people the U.S. has. Those are very big numbers, and that has real economic and other impact potentially. There's so much in this. The numbers are really quite small in terms of divorce down, marriage up. But the thing that's interesting about the divorce is that divorce has really hit Black families and low-income families hard. And this indicates that those two groups saw a bigger jump than other families. So that could be an interesting trend to follow. There's just a lot in here to think about, and some of it may be wishful thinking. Here's what we hope that this means, but things are definitely changing for families, and that's interesting.
Were the numbers that you just cited, Lois, surprising? That is, 1/3 of young adults predicted never to marry and 1/4 never to have children. I mean, are those numbers that are, and maybe this is unfair, significantly different than we've had in the past or that we expected?
Yeah, it depends on what you consider the past. If you're looking back to the 50s, 60s, 70s, it's definitely different.
Right.
If you're looking back 15 years, it's been sort of a slow building trend. I am the parent of 2 girls in their 20s, and it's unclear to me, and this is getting toward late 20s, it's unclear to me that they ever intend to marry or have children. It's just, I don't know. And it's the same is true for a lot of their friends. It's really hard to say.
And there's probably less pressure today to do that than there would have been, say, 20 or 30 years ago.
There's totally less pressure. The other thing that's really interesting in this report is who is getting married. The people most apt to get married, and it's so funny because Brad Wilcox from the Institute for Family Studies and from the National Marriage Project says that people talk left and walk right. So the people who are most apt to get married right now are people who are well-educated, affluent, which college-educated tends to be a little bit more liberal sometimes, but they're following this more traditional path. Also, those who are more conservative and those who are more religious, which could be either well, religious could be either side of the political aisle, but the more conservative. So it's kind of a split there that's interesting. I at least find that really fascinating, who's getting married and who's not.
Did they talk in this study at all about what seems to be a national trend to marry later?
Oh yeah, and that is actually that's part of the having children part too. If you are like me, I got married when I was 36. If you're like me, you have less time to have children. You have to decide you definitely want to have children or be surprised by having children one way or the other, because time is important to how big your family is going to be if you are having your family in a traditional way. It just is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting to me because I can also understand how getting married later actually leads to more stability, right? Because you're maybe more established.
There's no question. And you also, I think, at least my view is I had a really good idea of what I was willing to marry, of who I was willing to marry, as opposed to who I dated when I was younger. And so I think you're a little bit more established perhaps in a career, or you have made some choices that have sort of set you on a more stable path. By the time I got married, I had a house. Mm-hmm. But I'm what the Institute for Family Studies also decries. You know, instead of being a cornerstone where I married someone and we build a life together, I sort of build a life and then went, oh, yeah, okay, I'd love to marry you. That'd be great. So there's a different approach, and the results are different as well.
Yeah.
Lois, I find that some of the young people that I speak with who are considering marriage or having children are less optimistic about the future. And by I guess I'm not articulating this very well, but do I really want to raise a child in the current environment? You know what I mean?
There's a ton of that,
right,
yes.
Thinking about where we're going with the planet or with the country or whatever. I just find that a lot of young people are more concerned about that than they were back in the day when I was thinking about raising a family.
I think that that's really true, and I think that we're more politically divided. There are louder voices on both sides. Regardless of what you think, there are louder voices yelling at you that you're wrong, or that things are bad, or that there's only one way for things to be good. And I think that it's expensive to raise a family now in ways that it wasn't when we were all younger and raising kids. And so I do think that there's a certain discouragement. There's a lot of look at the climate. Is the earth burning up? Is politics going to turn around? Is, air pollution? Whatever you are focused on, there's enough bad news to go around. What gets missed is that there's also a lot of good news to go around. It's sort of, are you going to be glass half empty or half full?
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And, I see in my own children this trend to marry later, have children later, maybe buy houses later, right? So I think my husband and I bought our first house when I was 26, maybe. And my kids are in their late 20s, and some of them are pushing in their 30s, right? Early 30s. I've got a son that's going to get married for the first time this year, and he's 32. His fiance is 33.
Well, it's a lot harder to buy a house now than it used to be.
Right, but that's part of the calculation.
And that's a whole separate topic. But I mean, not only are you competing with other families for your dream house, but you're competing with venture capitalists.
Right.
You're competing with, there's a whole bunch going on in that market. But it is more expensive. It's more expensive for childcare. It's more expensive if you want a career. It's just more expensive.
It is. It feels like to me that's some of my kids' calculations, right? Is how much money do I need to be able to feel like I can marry and have kids, right? Whereas my husband and I were like, hey, let's just get married. It'll all work out.
And we'll see what happens.
Right.
It's true.
As finances get tougher, a child obviously cuts into that. And people are thinking, boy, I'm traveling right now. I'm eating well. I'm doing what I want to do. If I have a baby, that's going to... We thought that too, but it was expected. For me, I knew I was going to have children.
I also think that appetites have changed a little bit. And I was different than my brother. My brother got married very young, and he didn't care as much about travel as I did. He didn't care as much about a lot of things that I did that were expensive.
Yeah.
So appetites are different too.
I have one quick last question for you. This is from a texter, and they are asking if there are any numbers for people who don't marry, but they have an intact family, and they say their daughter and her boyfriend have been together for 10 years and are raising a daughter together. They might never marry, but they plan to stay together forever.
Not in this report, but that's really common in many parts of the world. That's very common in Scandinavia. I think
You establish long-term partnerships, but not technically marriage.
They're not in this particular report, but there's quite a bit of data about them out there. And they give the same benefits to kids in terms of double income. As long as you're truly committed to each other and committed to your partnership, then it's the question of a piece of paper.
Yeah.